Fox News Podcast presents Bret Baier's All-Star Panel.
America's got to be in the lead if you want to deal with these threats. We're going to lead.
The mourning is over. The Shiva is done. And if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic.
You know, my main priority right now is making sure that it delivers for the American people.
We have to make our country great again, and I will do that.
I think the president gets criticized by people all the time for the stuff he says, by people who ignore what he does.
Now, Fox's chief political anchor, Bret Baier.
President Trump cut his time in Canada short, leaving the international G7 summit a day early as tensions between Iran and Israel continue to escalate. More attacks both ways. Before boarding Air Force One, President Trump telling reporters he wasn't looking for a ceasefire anymore, but, quote, something better.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end.
So something that would be permanent.
Yeah, or giving up entirely.
The president is now calling for Iran's unconditional surrender, posting on Truth Social that the location of Iran's so-called supreme leader, in the president's words, is known, and warning that patience is running thin. Meantime, in a Minneapolis suburb, a shocking act of political violence has stunned the nation. Authorities say Vance Bolter was posing as a police officer when he showed up to the homes of State Representative Melissa Hortman and State Senator John Hoffman and opened fire on them, tragically killing the state representative and her husband and injuring Mr. Hoffman and his wife. To discuss this and more, we bring in our panel, USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers, Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams, and host of the Big Ben Show podcast and editor of The Spectator, Ben Domenech. All right, Ben, it does seem like this is bubbling up, and the president is not hiding the way he appears to be leaning. Not to say that this is all going to happen, but it very well could, that the U.S. Has some action inside Iran.
Certainly, Bret, and I think that this has been something that we've been observing for a long time. It's obviously an issue that the president himself has been very vocal about. The White House chose to make a point overnight of sending out a litany of times that the president has reiterated his belief that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And I take that as being an indication, a signal to those who support him that they should not be listening to the faction within the right that has issues with the president doing what he has done. Essentially, to this point, support of Israel, a clear engagement in terms of providing information, but also, in terms of their defensive posture. But he also clearly has the potential to go further than this. And it's a point of leverage that I think the president always tends to use when he has the opportunity to use it. Look, I look at this situation as one that is very predictable if you actually were paying attention to what Donald Trump has been saying about foreign policy, particularly regarding Iran, for the last decade. And if you weren't paying attention to that, I don't understand why. Because when he's clear about things, he tends to be very clear. And this is one of those areas where he has been the most consistent. So I'm not surprised by the posture that he's adopting here, even if it does surprise some members of his own party and coalition. But I think that it's also one that is mindful of the risks involved. And it's one of the reasons that he was hesitant about this to begin with and wanted to have the process play out.
You know, Francesca, it's interesting to watch the political dynamic inside the Trump base, and there's clearly a split, a divide in MAGA about this decision, whatever he eventually makes. And it doesn't seem to be fazing him. He's pushed back publicly, saying Iran can never have a nuclear bomb many times, to Ben's point. And even going so far as to push back directly to Tucker Carlson.
And what was interesting about this today, Bret, is that he seemed to employ the vice president to make this message today, or rather J.D. Vance decided to get involved on social media today. It's unclear which of those two things happened, but J.D. Vance entering the conversation and saying some of what Ben just said, that this is a position that the president has long held, and that he has said that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and that he said many times that they can do this the easy way, diplomatically, or that they can do this the hard way. I think what is splitting MAGA right now, though, is that they feel like where the movement is currently, and another thing he campaigned on was ending these quote unquote endless wars. And when you've seen his response to other conflicts, such as the Russia-Ukraine war, it has been to say, I want the killing to stop. I want to see this conflict come to an end. Prior to the last few days, he had been saying when it came to Israel and Iran, or just Iran, when it came to the nuclear talks that they were taking place, that he wanted to see some sort of a deal there. I mean, the United States, even up until last weekend, was still trying to get to the nuclear negotiating table with Iran. And so, there is this split that's taking place over which of those two directions that President Trump should go at this point. And I would also note, Bret, that this is an extremely fluid situation, that it's changing hour by hour here over at the White House where I am currently.
Yeah, the National Security Council meeting in the Situation Room. And again, Juan, whatever decision is made, if it is a decision to go after nuclear facilities, it would likely be the B-2 bomber delivering those 30,000-pound MOP bombs, massive ordnance penetrator, to get at those facilities.
That's right. That's what apparently Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel wants, because the Israelis don't have that equipment, and that's what it would take. I think that there's a lot going on here, and I think, I heard what Ben said, but I think that in the president's mind, he has not wanted to take the risk of U.S. intervention for a very strong reason. I mean, everybody remembers what happened, not only in Iraq in 2003 with President Bush, but you could go back, come forward from that to Libya and Omar Gaddafi, and the question becomes one of regime change. If somehow the Iranians agreed to the president's call for unconditional surrender, exactly who would they be surrendering to? Would this mean, you can't imagine that Israeli forces would be on the ground, NATO forces? I don't think so. So is it U.S. forces on the ground? Are we talking about regime change? In the case of Gaddafi, that led to years of chaos. And of course, we saw what happened in Iraq when President Bush said mission accomplished. It was not at that time. The fighting went on. So my sense is that what we've heard from Ben and Francesca is right. I think Vice President Vance has folded on the idea that let's hold back. I think that now the momentum is with this administration going forward as an ally to Israel in taking out the potential nuclear facilities that exist in Iran. I must quickly add here that the president had to contradict Tulsi Gabbard, who testified, I believe, in March, that she didn't believe that the Iranians were any place close to having that capacity. And the Wall Street Journal reports today that American intelligence to this moment does not agree with Israeli intelligence reports that say that the Iranians are close to having that capacity.
Yeah, it was late March. Go ahead, Ben.
Weigh in on that for just a second. I think it was telling that J.D. Vance, when he sort of weighed in on social media, as Francesca made reference to, he made a point of defending D.N.I. Gabbard on this point, saying that what she said at the time is not inconsistent with what he believes and what the president believes today, and that obviously there's been some time but since that March testimony. One thing, though, that I think is very true is that the Israelis have always believed that the Iranians were closer than the general assessment of the American intelligence community. And so I think that is a gap there where the president essentially ended up on the Israeli side of this argument. And to Juan's point, and I think this is very important, the truth is that Donald Trump had been inconsistent about the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war. He was not inconsistent about this Iranian nuclear threat. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that a lot of people thought those wars were going to turn out differently than they did, and perhaps not have the kind of length of time, length of investment of American resources that they had, that allowed them to be categorized by critics as forever wars. The thing that I think is going on here at this particular moment is the president sees an opportunity to end the nuclear threat of Iran. The vice president and others on his security team believe that this is something that should be a priority because of the ramifications if they do not take this opportunity, when the Iranian regime seems to be at its weakest point that it has ever been, really since the point where they involved themselves in so many of these proxy conflicts across the globe. And so I think that in this moment, there is a little bit more of a window for people who have been critics of these wars in the past, including J.D. Vance, including many others within the Republican Party, to say, if this is the shot to take to make sure that the Iranians do not have this type of capability, maybe now is the time to do it.
Yeah. Panel, we'll hold it right there. Francesca, I mean, there just is this thought about what comes next. You know, say they drop the bombs, Israel continues the assault, but what happens on the ground? What's the next step? Is there fallout from hitting these facilities? Nuclear fallout, frankly. There's a lot of questions.
Israelis have been consistent in saying that they're not asking the United States for military support here. That would be up to the United States. And if that's something that President Donald Trump decides he wants to do, the way that the U.S. has been involved is to help with defensive operations. Meanwhile, the U.S. has made it quite clear that in President Trump's view, that I don't want to call it a red line per se, but the thing that would be activating for him would be if any American assets were touched, if any Americans were harmed in this. And right now, the president, I mean, he's tweeting, we can see it, or Truth Socialing in real time what his thoughts are. And you heard the State Department today saying, like, they're not going to try and characterize those things. You just have to take President Trump at his word. And you can see where his thinking is in real time, Bret, by looking at what he's saying in those social media posts. We know, as you were referencing, that the president met with his national security team earlier this afternoon. That meeting has since concluded. Just to give you a behind the scenes sense of just how much we're trying to read the tea leaves over here about what that might mean. Bret, you covered the White House for a long time. You know that when we see the Marine outside of the West Wing, that tells you that the president is in the West Wing. And when the Marine's not there, that he might not be in there. And you have a situation where reporters are actually out there looking to see, is he in the West Wing currently? Is he in the Situation Room? Where might he be based on where this Marine is? And what does that mean for news that might be coming?
Yeah, you're always trying to read what's happening in these moments. Meantime, Juan, the big, beautiful bill is being unleashed on Capitol Hill and the Senate side, and the president's saying he wants it on his desk by the 1st of August.
Well, it's an ambitious date, in part because right now it looks like there's stronger opposition forming on the Republican side in the Senate, and largely over deficit spending. But also there's some concern about the political implications of, social safety net cuts, specific Medicaid. So I think there are lots of people who have questions and want to be reassured. The House bill as it stands, the one that passed earlier this month, does not look to have much of a shot in the Senate. So you're talking about negotiations between House and Senate. And of course, everyone is looking to the White House and President Trump. At the moment, the thought on Capitol Hill is he's a busy man. He's got the potential for some serious business in the Middle East to attend to. So they're not expecting him to be the so-called closer, but it may take him just asserting once again how important this is for the Republican Party, that they would have some success here. And he's going to have to speak to those very strong, increasingly strong number of naysayers in the Senate.
Yeah, final word here, Ben. Obviously, you can walk and chew gum if you're an administration that has to deal with big issues. But there's a lot of big issues happening. The immigration situation out west with the National Guard being called in, the battles around courtrooms around the country on a number of policy fronts, and obviously the wars overseas.
I realize that Donald Trump can compartmentalize better perhaps than any modern politician, but this is quite a lot to have on your plate all at the same time. At the same time, I would say to Juan, I think this bill is too important for him to let it lapse. I think he will lean into that to the greatest degree necessary. And I think that it will get through. I think it's an inevitability that it will get through. But I will say that this current tactic in terms of this past week, really did seem like, to me, a slap in the face to Ron Johnson and to some of the other folks who, have sounded fiscal alarms around this bill, particularly given that it seemed like they were more and more indicating that they were willing to play ball. So that's something that needs to change in order for it to pass. I think it will find its way to passage. But yes, they are definitely being asked to walk, chew gum, and dance with the plates.
Yeah, spin the
on
plates.
A regular basis.
There you go. All right, panel, thanks. Now for a bit of history. On June 18th, 1983, Sally Ride becomes the first American woman to go to space. Though she initially pursued a professional tennis career, Sally Ride shifted gears in 1977 when she saw a newspaper ad from NASA calling for young, tech-savvy scientists. After being accepted, Ride worked as an on-the-ground capsule communicator for 2 years before becoming a part of the STS-7 crew, where she served as a mission specialist aboard the Challenger space shuttle and became the first American woman to launch into space. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Francesca, Ben, and Juan, I'm Bret Baier. We'll see you next time. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.